what I'm thinking is I think the high on the Nasdaq 100, potentially the S&P 500, we will not take those out for over 10 years. Markets like to break out and then they like to retrace back to what we call the scene of the crime. And a good trader can quickly pivot. Traders that don't pivot, they're the ones that end up losing out. It's all about that pivot.
In case anyone is standing up, maybe you want to sit down, and if you're drinking, put your drink down. Gareth, we've been talking now about the stock market, and we mentioned the possibility, or even the real probability of a recession. I even heard you say in one interview something which I've said in my videos about a long-term depression. One book that I read last year was by, I'm sure you know who he is, Robert Prechter, the analyst Robert Prechter, who I think is a fantastic analyst. And Robert Prechter, he believes this is not any ordinary bear market. This is going to last many years. I believe you just said this a few minutes. You just said this as well, recently. He said it's going to last many years because this is the bear market that's going to essentially make a correction to a bull market that started at the beginning of the last century, the beginning of the 20th century. So in other words, the secular bull market finished in January of this year, and now we're starting a secular long-term bear market. In case anyone is standing up, maybe you want to sit down, and if you're drinking, put your drink down, because Robert Prechter believes we're going to have an 80% or 90% drop on the stock market over the next several years, not 1 year, several years in this decade. I want to know what you think. Are you as bearish as he is? How bearish are you? Do you think this is more of a medium term, over the last couple of years? Or are you much more bearish, similar to Robert Prechter, in a depressionary bear market?
Yeah, so what I'm thinking is I think the high on the Nasdaq 100, potentially the S&P 500, we will not take those out for over 10 years. I do think that's the case. And I think it might even be reminiscent of the .com, where the Nasdaq did not take out the high. I think it was almost 15 years before it took out those highs. And I think there's a couple things that concern me, right? And I could see why he could be correct on this, is that number one is you have to keep an eye on the 100-year cycle, right? There's always something, people will tell you this, and I've heard this many times, is that every generation needs to experience a Great Depression. Well, we're coming up to the 100-year cycle of the Great Depression later this decade. Think about you might say, well, 100-year cycle, what's that? Well, think about the Spanish flu and COVID, 100-year cycle, right? So you do have some basis in cycles to understand that or to make sense of it. And then also, if you just look at the charts, I mean, what's remarkable about this and why I think people have to be so careful thinking that any low is a significant low where it's going to go back to all-time highs is that, I mean, you're looking at the chart. If you, and I don't know if you mind, do you mind if I show my chart again?
Yeah, please go ahead, please. Yeah.
So if you look at, this is the S&P 500, right? Look at the move we've had since the Fed started printing money. I mean, this was a bull market here in the late 90s. This was a bull into 2000, and this makes those look like tiny little peas, right? I mean, same thing with the Nasdaq 100 is, even if you compare, and this is kind of scary too, is the vertical nature of the .com is almost like the vertical nature since COVID on the chart, except this one is so much bigger than the .coms even. I mean, amazing. So I do think that there's, I mean, to me, if you're asking me in the next, I mean, again, it's hard to know if it's the next 2 years or in the next 7 years or whatever, but if I had to guess where this market will bottom out, I'm going to go out on a limb and I think that you're going back, you have to go back and retest the previous levels. So something in trading that I found to be very, very accurate is that markets like to break out and then they like to retrace back to what we call the scene of the crime, right? Where the breakout point was. And the problem is we never did this with the cycle high. Like on the S&P 500, when you broke out, you just kept going. I mean, except for COVID, little dip here, but there's a need for a market or a stock to retrace back to that level. So if I had to guess, I think that's where we're going back to. I don't know the time frame. Timing is so hard, but I do think that's where we're going to go back to.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. I'm still, put it this way, it's a probability that I think, as you were saying with Gareth, there's a probability we've entered the bear market but I'm also open-minded in a sense that I could be wrong, and maybe the markets can at some point prove us wrong if they break above resistance. We'll talk about it in a different session.
You're right. I mean, honestly, and I think that's so important is that, you could have all the signals in the world pointing to something, and we don't know. We don't know for sure. You don't know what can ultimately happen. So I think you're 100% right. Is that you basically all we can do is trade what we see, and then that can change on a daily basis. And a good trader can quickly pivot. Traders that don't pivot, they're the ones that end up losing out. It's all about that pivot.
Before we finish, Gareth, tell us what are some of the things that people can do to learn more about you and also get involved with your trading. I know you have your website, inthemoneystocks.com. What can people get from that? By the way, do check it out, inthemoneystocks.com.
Yeah, so basically I have a service there that is a subscription service, and on a monthly basis, I do a video every single day. It's basically 100% psychology of the markets, of trades, of technical analysis. I put that out real time, and people can kind of follow those if they so choose.
Gareth, thank you so much, indeed. And thanks also to Sarah for setting this up. Really appreciate it, Gareth.
Yeah, it's been a true pleasure to talk to you. I hope we get to talk again in the future.
Absolutely, yeah. And let's see what happens in the next several months. Might be an interesting situation we're in the next several months.